So there's a man that drove a car into a crowd in New Orleans, and his last name was Jabbar. And other than that, there's nothing about him that's actually Muslim, but all the headlines are saying this is a Muslim and so on and so forth. And so if you look at his behavior, it's quite obvious that he's not Islamic at all. He was arrested twice, or disciplined twice, when he was part of the military for driving under the influence. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. So if you're Muslim, the one thing you can't do, you can do a lot of stuff, but you can't drink alcohol. Certainly not to the point where you're impaired. And so right off the bat, there's something suspicious going on. But number two, he had a lot of personal debt. And so if you're really a hardcore Muslim, right, you're not allowed to, participate in anything that's usurious that charges high interest rates. And so so in other words, a mortgage might be okay under certain circumstances, but if you're a hardcore, you're into essentially Islamic law, it just depends on how essentially fundamental you want to get about the whole situation, but you certainly have to avoid credit card debt. And so you've got personal debt, drinking alcohol, and also fighting overseas in essentially an unjust war that was an extension of the illegal war in Iraq. And we now realize that the war in Afghanistan cost $1 trillion to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. So what's happened? How did this guy who's not really Muslim, who's more Christian than Muslim, how does he end up with an ISIS flag driving a car in a terrorist attack through a New Orleans crowd? And New Orleans is one of my favorite cities. And I think the answer is something that the newspapers can't talk about. And if you look at the British, right, intelligence agencies work together. The British have a counter-terrorism program called Prevent. And so millions of dollars, probably billions, are spent attempting to, quote unquote, integrate people into American society. So every society is afraid of a lack of integration. And so they're afraid essentially of ethnic enclaves, religious enclaves. And part of that, especially in the United States, is a massive problem because of historical de jure or segregation by law. And so we've already got the racial component that's a massive problem already in the United States, right? Which is leading to huge problems in policing, equal policing, resources, and so on and so forth. But it's even, worse if you have a lack of integration when you have immigrants. And so, if the British have a program called Prevent, the Americans have a similar program. And so the only thing I can think of is that ultimately this gentleman tried to integrate into American society. He even joined the military. He fought in an unjust war. He drank alcohol, probably with his buddies, who were probably, and then got in a car and left, drove, got disciplined, and so on and so forth. Nothing too bad. He was honorably discharged, so discharged with honor, so no problems there on his permanent record. And essentially ends up, failing in the United States, despite being one of the most successful and articulate Americans to ever have been born in the United States. And you see that from his video where he's advertising his real estate business. And so after all this is said and done, and he's raising children as well, neighbors in the Wall Street Journal article are saying that he was a terrific father, no issues there. So what I think had to have happened ultimately is that he was part of a victim of these quote-unquote counterterrorism programs that seek to integrate Muslims into Western society and fail miserably. Almost all of them have failed. In the UK, Prevent has been a massive disaster. Muslims are now less integrated than ever before. And so these programs have to be kept secret, because if someone's trying to push alcohol on you or pork on you because they're part of a counterterrorism program or a pro-integration program that's funded by government dollars and supported by corporations, because it's also a situation where maybe you want to invite a Muslim to your house. And this sounds insane, right? It sounds ridiculous, but there's a lot of money in the military, right? There's a lot of money that's designed to prevent future problems, right? And so if you're spending trillions of dollars on military, like in Afghanistan, you better believe there are other programs, right, that are designed for exactly this kind of thing, from top all the way to the bottom. And so everyone supports these programs because, again, somebody goes out, gets a reimbursement from the government for buying alcohol, right? So, you see this, by the way, in the United States. People started disavowing Bud Light. Well, why did they take such an interest in that? And again, if you think about it from the British perspective of Prevent, right, and you think there's another program in the United States that's being funded by government dollars or private entities like, I think it's Jeff Yass or the Adelson family that may have replaced right? In other words, it may not necessarily be only government money or intelligence counter-intel money. It could be these individuals that are billionaires that are really like focused on, making sure that their narrative prevails, particularly with some, foreign allies. So you've got all this money going in, right? But if you think about the antipathy that governors had against Bud Light for not towing the line politically, you think about the British Prevent program. You've got a guy who did everything right and basically, just didn't make it. That goes against everything that the American, dream is supposed to be. And for someone like me, I was arrested twice. Again, I don't do drugs at all. But I remember I went to bars because I love sports. And so, you want to watch a March Madness game, you got to go to some sort of like a Buffalo Wings or something, right? Guys are talking to me about how pork is great because it's not like the old days, where it was unclean and this is all BS, right? You still have mad cow disease. You still have, pigs that are now swine flu, right? But these guys are really like very charismatic. They buddy up to you. They pretend to be your friend. And ultimately, they're part of these counterterrorism programs, right? They could be. You don't really know. And if this sounds insane, Said, the most famous Palestinian poet, right, was under surveillance, right? And his wife was also working with intelligence authorities within the earlier state of Israel. So, it does seem weird that the intelligence community is surveilling everyone, but what do you think the NSA does? Why do you think they get so much money? Why do you think you can't really audit the Pentagon successfully or figure out what's in that black box funding for the NSA? And for me, I know the United States is built on a pile of lies, right? And that doesn't mean that Americans are bad people. It just means there's perhaps overly optimistic about all these different programs and about their way of life compared to today, compared to, I suppose, competing countries overseas.